Some of us do it better than others. All right, I'm going to try to tackle this question because many people asked this question, and it relates overall to the topic of COVID and vaccines and mandates. And so I'm going to read some of these questions that are very similar, and there's many more that came in that I won't read them all. Somebody said, my question is, I got COVID and was fine. Then my job forced me to get the vaccine to keep my job, and now have a very guilty feeling and burden. Should I feel this way? Somebody else, would getting vaccinated so that others aren't caused sickness and death be considered loving your neighbor? Also curious for your current perspective on the worldwide pandemic, fear, mandates, how or if this may be related to the end times and the coming of Christ. A lot of people were asking, is the vaccine the mark of the beast? Okay, and many other questions that came in related to this topic. So, but one of the questions I want to read because I feel like I need to address this since it was asked this directly. For the Q&A service, why has COVID become a religious topic instead of viewing it as a medical topic? The church seems to be synonymous with a stance that is lax on COVID, and I'm assuming that the individual means our church in particular, but because of the way the rest of the question goes. The church seems to be synonymous with a stance that is lax on COVID. The church states it has no official stance on the COVID vaccine, which we have said that on our website, so that's why I think this is specific to us, yet offers religious exemption letters, which we do on our website, and also at no point recently has encouraged practices to limit the risk of transmission. Other churches are more proactive on these measures, and I'm wondering why Cornerstone seems to be the only environment where considerations of COVID are suppressed or largely ignored. So, let me address this as best as I can, and I want to try to be careful because this is a sensitive subject. Obviously, hundreds of thousands of people have died from COVID. We've been touched by it as a staff through various family members of our staff, not on our staff directly, but various staff family members. I've lost a couple of friends. So this is real. This is something that has affected people on many different levels. And I also want to clarify something too that people have emailed because they've misunderstood things that I've said. So I want to be clear. I am not anti-vax. People have accused me of this. What I am, though, is anti-mandate. And why is this something that we should even talk about? Some people have said, as one of the questions intimated, why is this a religious issue instead of just a medical issue? Why are we talking about this? Okay, here's why we're talking about it. When the government mandates a vaccine, it becomes something that as Christians, 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20 says, you are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your body. There is an important distinction between personal responsibility and government overreach. At the point where government is telling you that you should put something in your body and removing the choice that you have, then it becomes a religious issue in my mind. Because now we're talking about, well, wait a minute, my body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. I need to have an understanding of what God wants me to do with my body. If you have the freedom to get the vaccine, get the vaccine. If you feel like you don't want to get the vaccine, don't get the vaccine. But we shouldn't be shaming each other for doing it or not doing it. Now, I know what some people say, and there's a legitimate argument about fetal cell lines that were used to develop the vaccines, but the problem with that argument is fetal cell lines were also used to develop Tylenol and aspirin and Claritin and Benadryl and a lot of other things. So for me, the issue really comes down to 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20. You're not your own, you're bought at a price, therefore honor God with your body. What are you to do with your personal body or not? But here's why it appears to some people, as the question expressed, that we seem to be lax in COVID policies and protocols. Let me tell you something. Nothing makes sense with this. There have been so much conflicting information, even among scientists in the medical community. If someone were to say to me, why aren't you doing this or why aren't you doing that? I could give you another medical argument why that doesn't work, okay? How many of you remember when they first said, get the vaccine and it'll prevent infection, and now they're saying get the vaccine and it'll prevent hospitalization? How many of you remember when they first said don't wear masks? Wearing masks, put your fingers up by your face and it could infect you. And then it became wear a mask. And then it even at one point was double mask, okay? I had an ER doctor in our own church about a year ago come up to me saying, an ER medical doctor, saying, you know that most of these masks are completely ineffective. The size of the virus versus the pores of most of these masks, it's like shooting a BB through a chain link fence. I mean, it's ineffective, okay? There's so much conflicting information. Remember when they used to say 6 feet of distancing? Now they say 3, okay? They used to say 10 days of isolation. Now they're saying 5. That just came out a couple of weeks ago, 5 days of isolation. Now check this out in the medical community, and then I'll explain why I'm giving all these different scenarios. You can be in the medical field, let's say a nurse. You can test positive for COVID, but under the new CDC regulations, after 5 days, you could still potentially test positive, but you're able to go back to work, but someone who is unvaccinated, a similar person in the medical field, unvaccinated, tests negative for COVID, can't go to work in that same hospital. In other words, it's not making sense. And when things don't make sense, when people say, well, why don't you follow different protocols? Have you been following the news, even the USS Milwaukee? They shut down this Navy ship because COVID was rampant through the whole ship, but it was 100% vaccinated. Everybody on the ship was vaccinated. When you look at all of this and you say, this seems a bit confusing, it is, because people don't really know. We don't really know. So, as a pastor, since nobody really seems to know all of the, what is the right protocol, because the protocol keeps changing and things have such variables. As a pastor, what am I to do? Just say, well, we'll just shut down the church until they figure this all out. They're not going to figure it all out. So, we will open the church, and then people can make personal, responsible decisions about this. If you feel like I don't want to come to church, if you feel like I don't feel safe, I don't want to come to church, watch online. We stream it all online. If you're in the categories where you're high risk, you probably shouldn't, but it's still your choice. You can wear a mask or not wear a mask. You can social distance or not. I mean, it comes down to personal responsibility. Look, there's a fine line. I get it. People are like, well, don't you love your neighbor enough that you should tell people to get vaccinated? The vaccines don't stop infection. They've already proven it now. So it comes down to personal choice and personal responsibility. And so, we'll open the church because Hebrews 10:25 says, don't forsake the assembling of believers. We shut down for about 6 weeks when we thought this was going to, be death in the millions. All right? But then we open back up. And we don't want to forsake the assembling of believers. And people can make decisions and choices. We don't shame anybody for what their decisions or choices are. That's a long answer, but because I got so many questions on this, I just felt like, and again, for those who are like, well, this isn't really a church issue. The government's made it a church issue. When they've said, you will either lose your job. The government just discharged 200 Marines. 200 Marines who are serving our country because they have personal conviction about not getting the vaccine, and they're not accepting the religious exemption. And employers, you're going to get fired unless, by the way, the Supreme Court is hearing all of this January the 7th. And so we need to be in prayer about this, because this is going to come down to, government control or personal responsibility. And it is serious. I get it. And people are grieving, and people have lost loved ones. I get it. I'm not minimizing that. I'm just saying at the same time, and by the way, people who have asked, is this the mark of the beast? Look, this is not the mark of the beast, because in the book of Revelation, the church is gone before the mark of the beast. Okay, we haven't been raptured yet. But I will say this is a precursor to the mark of the beast. It is priming people mentally and psychologically to be prepared for the government to tell you if you can go into certain places or buy certain things based on whatever passport you have. And in that day, the mark of the beast will either be on your forehead or on your right hand. But it's preparing people for that, because people are going to get used to this. Oh, I can't go into this store unless I show a certain thing. I can't buy unless It's preparing you for this. You shouldn't feel guilty if you had to get the vaccine, if you felt like, if we have, I don't fault missionaries who are like, they want to go on the foreign mission field and they need to get a vaccine. I mean, it comes down to personal responsibility. It's not the mark of the beast, but it certainly is paving the way for it and preparing people for it. So a long answer to the questions, but many came in, so I feel like I needed to address it. All right, you guys jump in now.
Awesome. Tagging along with the mark of the beast thing too, I've had questions come up like, what if I accidentally got the mark of the beast? And you'll know that you'll get the mark of the beast.
Yeah, but we won't be.
But we won't be here. Yeah. But I'm just saying,
well, in Scripture too, doesn't it say that there will actually be, God will send an angel flying around to warn people about it?
Yeah. So
pretty cool.
It's not like you're going to accidentally, whoops, I got the mark of the beast. It's an allegiance thing to the Antichrist, I think. Anyway, I have a question.